Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel, Think Outside the Board, for another installment of the Kickstarter Weekly. Today's episode is going to cover games that are funding between May 2nd and May 8th, and I'm running a little bit late this week. I'm going to talk about that for just a couple short minutes to kind of explain what's been going on. But if you don't want to sit through that explanation, then, as always, you can just go down into the bookmarks and click on where you want to start watching. That could be with the games that I've played that I'm going to be talking about. It could be with the 5 crowdfunding campaigns that are completing their funding for this week. And please remember to like and subscribe. Okay, so we have a puppy. He's a wonderful little puppy, but he's very rambunctious and he has a lot of energy and he pulls a lot at the leash, which is not a big deal, except he does it constantly. And to make a long story short, my back has been so badly thrown out that I was basically bedridden for a few days, which means that I couldn't work on this. I couldn't sit down and do video editing or recording. I'm actually still in a lot of pain right now, but I'm just pushing through it to get this out. I've actually canceled the game day I had later this week. I was going to be getting some games played that I still need to get played from my 2020 list before I can do my top 30 of 2020. I've canceled that for Friday, and I'm just going to be spending Thursday and Friday recording the next week's videos so that that can get out on time. Which means that there'll be another video coming out in a few days, and that one will be out in advance far enough that you can watch the video when it comes out and have several days to review all of the campaigns and decide if they're things that you want back or not. Now, I thought about just skipping this week and not putting the video out, but there are still several campaigns that I'm going to be talking about that are still live, and I thought historically, I'm a big fan of John Gets Games, and I'm a big fan of Paul Grogan at Gaming Rules, and they both do vlogs. And for one, it's one way for me to talk about games that I'm currently playing and what I feel about those games and how I want to rate those games. I'm doing a lot of kind of behind the scenes to prepare a new studio space, and as I get into that, you're going to see me focusing more on teach and review videos. Later in the year, I'm going to be launching a Twitch channel, doing a lot of live streams and live plays, and I may even do some TikTok videos. My focus with this channel is very much on backers and the customer, so I'm not going to be one of those content creators who's doing a lot of videos for Kickstarter campaigns or sort of promotional videos. So I don't plan on using TikTok videos as short little advertisement for games, but I figure I can use it as short little reviews, which I think would be very fun to produce, and also a way to generate further traffic for the site. So those are all things that are coming. But for now, these Kickstarter Weeklies are a really good way for me to talk about the games that I'm playing. Also, I do want a record of the games that I recommend, the games that I pick and choose as the best crowdfunding campaigns out there. Because I think if people find this channel in the future and they're looking back at videos to see where my taste lies, and if I'm the sort of person that represents their tastes well, or even if knowing my tastes then helps them make a decision. That's always something that I thought was very valuable with Siskel and Ebert. I didn't always agree with their movie reviews back in the 80s and 90s, but I knew their tastes well enough that I knew what I would think about a movie based on what they thought. I don't always agree with Shut Up and Sit Down, but I understand their tastes well enough that I can watch a video, a review they do of a game, and I have a pretty good idea of whether I'll like the game no matter whether they liked it or they didn't. They do a very good job at showcasing the game. So I think that there is value to have this video in full, even if it's a little bit late, because people can go back later and then see where my tastes are and how that represents them. The one crowdfunding campaign that I've already missed is Maglev Metro, but I definitely would like to get this video edited and up and promoted before that Dark Quarter campaign completes, so that people can have one last look at it, one last prodding to examine the campaign, because it may be something that they don't want to miss out on, and they may not know that yet. But if you're a subscriber or a regular watcher, then hopefully seeing that will give you a reminder, and you'll go take a look at the campaign if you think it is something that you might want to back that you haven't backed yet. So that's just my brief explanation. I will be talking about 5 campaigns this week. We'll get to them very soon, but first, I'm going to talk about the one game that I played this period twice. that game is Descent: Legends of the Dark. Now, I've been talking about it as I've been playing through the various scenarios. We actually restarted the campaign once because my fiance wasn't really having a great time with it. It's never worth it for somebody to feel forced to play something that they're not interested in. So we used that opportunity to kind of clean slate it, and my friend Ryan and I have been playing it, playing 2 characters each. Now, if you've been watching my other videos, you know I've been enjoying the dungeon crawling a lot and the creation of the terrain as you're playing, the maps, and dealing with all of that. But I haven't really been a big fan of a lot of the writing in the game. I think it's bordering on the juvenile, and there is a lot of, it's an app-based game. There's a lot of cutscenes and dialogue scenes, and they're not very well written, in my opinion. So that's kind of been an ongoing problem. Now, we had gotten to a scenario the first time where we played it where we'd actually lost, and that was where my fiance decided to stop playing. And this past weekend, it was a little tough because I was playing with a really hurt back. I was in screaming pain the whole time. I still had a good time with the game, but I was in a lot of pain, and it took a lot of time to play the game this past Sunday. So we replayed the one scenario that we'd lost the first time around. We had a better idea of what to do, and so we beat that scenario. Then we went into the second scenario of the day, and unfortunately, this is the first scenario where I feel the bad writing kind of bled into the design of that scenario. So what happens in this particular scenario, you're doing some things, you end up in an area, there's a gate, and there's more monsters spawning outside the gate. Now, there are bookshelves in the room, and there's a lectern with a book on it, so you're kind of looking through these things, you're getting certain clues, you're aware that there's some kind of puzzle that has to do with the bookshelves and the lectern. But the information that's communicated is very minimal, to the point that I would say there's no way to really figure out how to solve the puzzle. It's not really provided for you within what's happening in that scene. Now, to make matters worse, because there are monsters kind of spawning outside of this gate, quite a few monsters, it makes logical sense to keep that gate down and keep the monsters behind it. There's a lever that you can pull which would open the gate, but I think logically for most people it will make sense to not touch that lever. The problem is you need to pull that lever because a pillar will fall down in the middle of the room. The pillar is going to be a certain color, and then you need to enter a certain code in a lectern based on some numbers you've seen around the bookcases and the color of the pillar. Here's the thing, even knowing that, the puzzle is not very solvable because there isn't instruction given to you about the nature of the puzzle or how to solve it. And so I think even having all of the information about the puzzle, which we did, we still didn't really know how to go about solving it. And meanwhile, there's more and more monsters piling outside this door. So my friend Ryan and I kind of cheated. We looked on the Board Game Geek forums. We found the nature of the puzzle and how to solve it. And there were several threads of very angry game players who had experienced the same thing that we did, and the fact that there really is no way to solve the puzzle without looking for an explanation of the puzzle elsewhere. And that's just really bad game design. Now, understanding the puzzle, I think we could go back and play this scenario and beat it. But I don't think there's any real way to beat the scenario unless you cheat. And you probably need to cheat before you even play the scenario. And the way that this game is designed and the app is designed, you can't replay a scenario once you've played it. Now, there are still reasons for us to have played through that scenario, even though we lost, because you are getting certain materials, things that you find, you are working on certain skills and feats that will open up certain loot and things like that. So there is still a net gain, even though we played this scenario for 4.5 hours trying to figure it out and losing it. It sucks to lose something when it feels like there's no way you could have won because it's designed so poorly. But at least we did get something out of that scenario. Now, I could see my friend Ryan being somewhat let down by this development. He'd been enjoying the game a lot. And he said something after we were done like, well, I'd still like to finish the campaign, but he was really unhappy about the way that that scenario had been designed, and because of that, how it was basically unwinnable. And I agree with him. Now, I'm still having a good time with the game overall as well. I still want to complete it. We're still going to do that. But the score, my kind of rating, is definitely taking a dip because of it. So previously I had been at about an 8.5 for the game. I think this experience is knocking down my sort of working running score to a 7.5. I hope that we won't encounter this kind of problem again, and the scenarios themselves will be so good, and the ending of the campaign will be good enough that my rating, by the time I finish playing it, will bump back up to an 8.0 or maybe even an 8.5 again. But for now, it's been reduced to a 7.5 because of bad writing and really bad design, in my opinion. And I don't like too harsh on anyone's work, but I also think it's important to communicate these things to other gamers who may be considering paying $200 for this game. Or if they get it on a sale, I think I've seen it as cheaply as maybe $120. It may even come down a little bit below that, but the MSRP on this, I believe, is like $199. So I think people deserve to know about potential problems to a game before they plunk down that kind of money. So we're still having a lot of fun with it. We're just hoping that that situation doesn't repeat itself. And from other comments that I saw on Board Game Geek, it feels like the majority sentiment of people is that the scenario is basically broken because of the way that it's designed, and you're just better off not playing it at all. It sucks. It sucks. You don't want to have to, go into a game figuring out ahead of time where you might have to cheat just so that you're not painted into a corner unfairly because the game doesn't communicate what you need to do. Even to the point where once you have all the elements of the puzzle, it's still almost impossible to solve it just because that information is communicated so unclearly. So I'm a little disappointed. Definitely the game has taken a dip in quality, in my opinion, because of that, and hopefully it'll be a one-off situation and the rest of the campaign won't have that kind of problem. But I will keep reporting back as we continue playing scenarios in the future, and we'll see. So that is the one game that I played this period. My back was out pretty badly, and I just couldn't really sit down to play games for this week. Now, I'm going to be filming again in a few days, so it's unlikely that I'll have any more played games by then. I know that I'm going to be playing a couple of games on Sunday with some friends. One of them is going to be Bonfire, which I have already played. I really like. I rated it a 9.0 the first time I played it. That was a 2-player game. I'm going to be playing a 3-player game on Sunday. And I may actually play it once more with my fiance before then. So the one game that I may play before I do the next Kickstarter Weekly in a couple days would be Bonfire. And then on Sunday, I will also be playing probably Viscounts of the West Kingdom. So I will probably be talking about those two games in the Kickstarter Weekly 2 weeks from now. And perhaps a few more games as well, but we'll see. But the video that I'll be shooting and posting in a few days likely won't have any played games in the played games section unless I manage to get in a 2-player game of Bonfire with my fiance. So all of that said, let's move forward now, and I'd like to talk to you about the 5 crowdfunding campaigns that are completing this week. Now, as I mentioned at the top, one of them is Maglev Metro, Mechs, Monorails, and more, and unfortunately that campaign has already completed. However, this is a game that was originally available at retail. It's still out there at retail. If the game sounds interesting to you, you can just go and get it at retail. This campaign, this most recent campaign, was for 6 more maps. It's a train game, so it's 6 more expansion maps that will, broaden the variability of that game. I imagine that those expansions will make their way into retail because it's by Bezier Games, and they do put most of their stuff out into retail. So I think if you've missed this campaign, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to lay pledge it or not, but if not, I think you'll still be able to get this one at retail, and you can get the base game at retail right now. And it is a very solid game. It's a train game, but it does things a little bit differently than other train games, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So Maglev Metro had a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They ended up funding just over $200,000, about $203,000, which was 20 times that minimum required funding goal. It completed its funding on Tuesday, May 3rd, which was actually this morning. I'm recording this video on a Tuesday. Maglev Metro is a game for 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 60 to 90 minutes. It has a medium-heavy complexity, and the risk of the campaign I set at low, because Bezier Games has always done a really good job in production of their games and distribution and in the Kickstarters that they've run. Now, Maglev Metro is a train game. There are a few things that make it unique. It's a pick up and deliver game where players are picking up and delivering passengers, and the passengers are different colors. They are light purple, dark purple, pink, and red. And there are also 3 different kinds of robots in the game because this game is set in the future on a monorail system. The robots are silver, gold. There's a few other similar colors. There's like a bronze. That's actually one of the things that they've cleaned up a little bit in this Kickstarter, because in the original game, some of those colors were fairly close together. But in the Kickstarter campaign, they offered new screen printed meeples, and the printing is different on different colored meeples. So it will help players further distinguish like the bronze meeple from the gold meeple. And of course, on top of that, there are 6 different maps. So players are picking up and delivering robots and passengers. And the other thing that makes the game unique is that as they do that, they will actually be plugging those passengers and those robots onto a player board, a dual layered player board. And as they do that, they're going to be upgrading different abilities that they have that they can do with their trains. Sometimes it's about how many spaces you can go when you move, or how many passengers you can pick up or drop off, or the number of tracks that you can build with one action. It's sort of an engine building game. And it's a lot of fun. It also has tracks that are on these clear tiles. And so whenever you build tracks, you're placing these clear tiles on top of other players' clear tiles, which means that each player's train network functions independently of everyone else's, and they can all kind of coexist. So this isn't a train game where when you build the tracks, you're actually cutting off other players. No, all of these different players' train tracks can coexist. So there are definitely some very interesting and unique mechanics to this game that make it different from other train games. And I think the strongest element for me is that player board and the way you're building an engine and upgrading your abilities as you're taking actions and moving passengers around. It's a really solid, cool game. Now, it's designed by Ted Alspach, who has also designed Castles of Mad King Ludwig, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, One Night Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak, Suburbia, and Werewords. And some of the new expansion maps, I believe 2 of them, I think London and Paris, are designed by Dale Yu, who's previously worked on Fliz and Miez, Gibgas, and Start Free. The art on all of these new 6 expansion maps is by Alana Kelsey, who previously worked on the original Maglev Metro as well as Suburbia and Whistle Mountain. And the game is being published by Bezier Games, who originally published the base game through retail channels. They have previously published Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, The Castles of Mad King Ludwig, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, One Night Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak, and Suburbia. And that is Ted Alspach's company, so they mainly publish his games. Now, the individual pledge levels for this, there were 3 of them that were $30 each, and each of those pledges was for a different group of 2 different maps. So 1 board, 2 sides, 2 different maps. The first was for Mechs and Monorails. The second one was for Moon Bases and Mars. And then the third was for London and Paris. Now, if you wanted all 6 expansion maps, you could get them as a bundle. It would have been $90 to pledge each of those pairs separately, but the bundle is $80. It's called Maglev Maps Volume 1, and that also included a luxury box to store all of the 6 maps together, as well as 108 new screen-printed passengers and robots, and they will replace the robots and passengers in the base game, and they'll be more easily identifiable with that screen printing. The final pledge was for $120. It was called Maglev Metro and Maglev Maps Volume 1, and that threw the base game in with that 6-pack of the new maps. Now, if you kind of wanted to piecemeal some of the expansion maps together because you didn't want all of them, you could also add on the base game for $50. And you could also add on those screen printed passengers for $25 because you were only getting those with the bundle with all 6 maps. So let's say you wanted, the base game and a couple maps, or you already had the base game and you just wanted one of the map packs or 2 of the map packs. You could get those screen printed meeples separately as an add-on. Now, in the continental US, the shipping was being estimated at $18, $21, and $32. 18 if you were backing one of those map packs, 21 if you were backing all 3 together in the bundle, and 32 if you were getting the bundle of map packs and the base game. And Bezier Games is planning on delivering this new bundle of Maglev Metro maps in March of 2023. The next game on the list is The Dark Quarter, which had a minimum required funding goal of $79,000. They're currently at $922,000, which is about 12 times that minimum required funding goal. The Dark Quarter is going to complete its funding on Thursday, May 5th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 2 to 3 hours. Complexity on it appears to be medium light, although possibly medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low. Now, this is an interesting collaboration between publishers, because on the one hand, you have Van Ryder Games, who's involved, and Evan Derrick, the designer, and he designed a game called Detective City of Angels, which is a really great game. They've done a couple expansions for that over at Van Ryder. He also worked on Final Girl, which has blown up a lot recently. But the other publisher, Lucky Duck Games, has done a lot of games in the Chronicles of Crime series. There was the original game, and then a couple years ago, which is recently delivered, they did Chronicles of Crime 1400, 1900, 2400, and then there was one that kind of brought them all together in a triptych through time. They've taken that formula, that app-based detective, mystery, crime-solving experience, and they've taken it into the 1980s in New Orleans, and they've got a lot of characters that are pretty cool set around that time. You've got one character that is obviously visually based on Kurt Russell, and just a lot of stuff that really is of that time and of that place. So they've kind of taken this formula and they're moving it into a new space, a new theme, and it looks really cool. And the cases that you're going to be exploring and solving have to do with that theme and that tone. Now, the main designer on this is Evan Derrick, who's previously worked on Dark Moon, Detective City of Angels, and Final Girl, but he's had some help from other designers. I know Omari Akil, who did Hoop Gods and Rap Gods. He's one of the designers helping him out. The artists include Mateus Kamada, who previously worked on Chronicles of Crime 1400 and Vikings Gone Wild, and Jarek Nokon, who's worked on 1775 Rebellion, Coup, Freedom the Underground Railroad, K2, and The Resistance. And as I said before, it's kind of being co-published, but I believe the more main publisher of the two is Lucky Duck Games, and they've previously done Chronicles of Crime 1400, and Destinies. Now, there are 3 different pledge levels for this one. For $63, you can pledge The Rookie, which will include the base game and then an expansion, a free expansion that's included for everybody. It's called The Yesterday Demon and Other Stories. It's kind of a stretch goal expansion. For $99, you can pledge the Detective pledge level. That's going to include another expansion called Lost to the Night, and that expansion will include 3 additional scenarios. Finally, for $147, it's a bit of a jump there, you can pledge the Whole Damn Agency, and that's going to throw in a bunch of things that are sort of quality of play upgrades. So there's no new expansions, there's just a lot of upgraded components and stuff. It's going to include deluxe plastic tokens for some of the resources. Now, there's no money in the game, no coins, but there are experience points. And so they have metal experience points in the deluxe version, kind of like their version of metal coins. And then finally, there will also be included a deluxe miniatures upgrade. Now, if you pledge any level of the game, you are going to get some miniatures. You'll be getting the miniatures for the player characters. But if you get this miniatures upgrade added in, It's going to include 20 more miniatures that are, monsters and creatures involved in the various cases, as well as some of the NPCs. Now, if you want some of those extras, but not all of them, you can pledge at a lower level and then add on some of those things. $21 is the cost to include the deluxe metal experience point upgrades. $21 is also the cost for the deluxe plastic tokens, and $32 is the add-on cost for the deluxe miniatures upgrade if you're getting that on its own. The 3 different pledge levels have continental US shipping estimated at $17, $19, and $22. And Lucky Duck Games and Van Ryder Games is currently planning on delivering the Dark Quarter in October of 2023. A great time to deliver this game because it's going to be very spooky, and it'll be a great time for this to be landing at Halloween. Third on the list is a campaign happening over at Gamefound, and that is the Great Wall reprint. Now, this campaign had a minimum required funding goal of $53,000. They're currently at $683,000, which is about 13 times that minimum required funding goal. This one is also going to complete its funding on Thursday, May 5th. The game plays 1 to 4 players. Individual games, just like Dark Quarter, take 2 to 3 hours, although it's a little bit of a different situation. The Dark Quarter is more of a mystery-solving game, whereas this one is a Euro game and tower defense game with miniatures. The complexity on the Great Wall is heavy, and we're very sure about that one because this game has already existed. This is a reprint, so people have played it. So the complexity of the game isn't really an unknown or a mystery at this point. And the risk associated with this campaign I'm going to be setting at low. Now, currently the Great Wall, if you go and look at it over at Board Game Geek, it has a rating of 8.0, which is pretty solid. It is a Euro game. It's got worker placement in it, and it's also a tower defense game because players are going to be using different factions, and players are going to be, at times, possibly having to work together a little bit to fend off all of the Mongolian hordes that are constantly invading the Great Wall. But it's not a cooperative game. It is very much a competitive game. So even though you're involved in doing the same thing, you're not going to be working together too much, and there's going to be a winner in this game. The game has 3 different designers. Camille Sonex Cisla, who previously worked on Bees: The Secret Kingdom and Siege Storm Siege Mode. Robert Plesowitz and Lucas Lodarczyk, who's previously worked on Flick of Faith. And the artist on the Great Wall is Peter Gasick. He's previously worked on Aeon Trespass Odyssey, ISS Vanguard, Lords of Hellas, Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon, and This War of Mine, the board game. And the Great Wall is being published by Awakened Realms, who have worked on Etherfields, Lords of Hellas, Nemesis, Tainted Grail, and This War of Mine. There are 6 different pledge levels for the Great Wall, but it's really 3 pledge levels, just with 2 pledge levels at each pledge level because one of them includes Sundrop and one does not. Sundrop is a base paint on some of the miniatures, so that if you're someone that isn't planning on painting your miniatures, at least you'll have this wash on them, which will make them look better than just a bare miniature. So for $122, you can pledge the Dragon Pledge. That's going to get you the base game and the stretch goals. For $175, you can pledge the Sundrop Dragon Pledge, which is the same pledge, just with Sundrop applied to the miniatures. For $199, you can pledge Gameplay Bundle plus Iron Dragon, which will add in 3 things. The first of those is the Iron Dragon statue. So it's just a dragon, a big dragon miniature. And then you'll also be getting the Ancient Beasts expansion and the Black Powder expansion. Now for $262, you can pledge the Sundrop Gameplay Bundle and Iron Dragon, and it's the same thing with Sundrop applied to all of the miniatures in that package. Finally, for $297, you can pledge the Collector's Bundle plus Iron Dragon, and that's going to add in a playmat, card sleeves, upgraded resources, and an art book. And then for $358, you can pledge the Sundrop Collector's Edition plus Iron Dragon, which will give you Sundrop on everything. There's also a lot of ways to piecemeal different things. So if you're just getting that Iron Dragon statue as an add-on, you can add it on for $11. For $12, you can add on the Sundrop Iron Dragon. For $25, you can add on the Ancient Beasts expansion, which is essentially 4 more miniatures with monsters and their gameplay cards. For $30, you can add on the Sundrop version of the Ancient Beasts expansion. $53 is the cost to add on the Black Powder expansion because that has a lot more things, but it's miniatures that are related to terrain and things like that. So there's siege engines, catapults, towers, war machines, special soldiers, more content than in the Ancient Beasts expansion. And then for $62, you can pledge the Sundrop version of the Black Powder expansion. For $3, you can add an upgrade pack. That is for people who already have the Great Wall. It's going to include a new rulebook with some, changes, some things that have been cleaned up, as well as some cards, a few cards that have had some corrections made. You can add on the art book for $20. For $23, you can add on the upgraded resources. For $30, you can add on the playmat. For $20, you can add on card sleeves. That will be enough sleeves to cover everything in the base game and the stretch goals. And then for $11, you can get card sleeves that will give you everything you need for all of the expansions combined together. So if you want card sleeves for everything, you'll need to get both of those card sleeves. But remember, they are included in the highest pledge levels, the collector's bundle. Now, shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $23, $26, and $32, and that's for each of the kind of pairs of tiers. So whether you're getting, one pledge level or the Sundrop version, that's not going to affect the shipping cost because it's still the same thing. It's just that one thing has a wash applied, but it's not really going to affect the weight. And finally, Awakened Realms is planning on delivering the Great Wall reprint in May of 2023. We go back to Kickstarter for a game called Anastyr. They had a minimum required funding goal of $200,000. They're currently at $709,000, which is about 3.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Anastyr is going to complete its funding on Friday, May 6th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 90 to 120 minutes. The complexity on the game appears to be medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium low. Now, this is a cooperative game with miniatures. Players are going to have variable player powers. It's sort of a dungeon crawler, but the one thing that makes this really unique is that they've modeled the fighting system after video game brawlers. So the kind of things that you do, the techniques that you use, and the way that you build your characters and the fighting style is going to be based on making improvements and creating combos. It's got 13 different scenarios. You can play things as a one-off. You can also play them as a campaign. Now, the designer on Anastyr is Philip Ville, and then we have a bunch of artists. Carlos Amaral, George Klorenko, who's previously worked on Batman, Gotham City Chronicles, Conan, Mythic Battles Pantheon, and the others. David Desmarais, who's previously worked on Batman, Gotham City Chronicles, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, and Mythic Battles Pantheon. Justin Gerard, who's previously worked on Ascension Dreamscape, Asgard's Chosen, and Empire Express. Paolo Parente, who's previously worked on Conan, Magic the Gathering, Mythic Battles Pantheon, and the others. Wayne Reynolds, who's previously worked on Dungeon Twisters, Dungeons & Dragons, the Castle Ravenloft board game, and Magic the Gathering, and Daniel Zram, who's previously worked on OrcQuest. And Anastyr is being published by Mythic Games, who've previously put out Mythic Battles Pantheon, Super Fantasy Brawl, and Time of Legends Joan of Arc. Now, there are 2 pledge levels for this one, so there's not too much craziness to have to sort through. For $130, you can pledge the Companion Pledge, which is going to get you the base game, the Avatar box, and stretch goals. And for $160, you can pledge the Dragon Pledge, which will add in the Soulless expansion. You can also get the Soulless expansion for $40 as an add-on, but then there are 3 more expansions that are only available as add-ons. So even if you're pledging that highest level and you want everything, you're going to have to add on all 3 of these expansions as add-ons. All of them are $55 each, and they include the Allmother's Secret expansion, the Fog of Revolt expansion, and the Queen's Vow expansion. Continental US shipping is being estimated at $37, and Mythic Games is currently planning on delivering Anastyr in July of 2023. For the final campaign on this list, we go back to Gamefound for Last Light. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $50,000. It's currently sitting at $390,000, which is just under 8 times that minimum required funding goal. Like Anastyr, Last Light is going to complete its funding on Friday, May 6th. This is a game for 2 to 4 players. Plays in about 45 to 75 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium high. Now, the big selling point behind this one is that it's a space-themed 4X game. It's designed by Roy Cannaday, who's a huge fan of both 4X games and space-themed games, so this is kind of his ultimate game, and he's gone out and created it. And it plays in about an hour. So I think whether or not this is a game for you is very much going to depend on what you want out of your 4X games. If you really like big, sprawling 4X games that take several hours, you may not want to mess with a game that is supposed to play in about an hour, maybe even a little bit less. But if you're someone who really loves 4X games and you find that you often can't get them to the table, maybe what you need in your life is a 4X game that's supposed to be good. I mean, this is supposed to be good. A lot of people have said very positive things about this one. But a decent one that can play in about an hour. Now, to get that done, that means that mechanically it's not going to be that complex. That's why it's more in the medium light level. And again, that may appeal to some people if they want to be able to play a 4X game that they actually can get played that quickly. It needs to be a lighter game. But if you want a more complex game, you probably want a longer game, and then this may not be the game for you. So I think for some people, this is going to be an amazing game that they really want. Other people may look at it and say, well, it's interesting, there's some good things about it, but it's not meaty or chunky or substantial enough for a 4X game for me. So whatever camp you're in, that may determine whether or not this is something that you really want to pledge or not. Now, I mentioned before, this is designed by Roy Cannaday. People probably know him best at the Dice Tower, where he's been an editor. In the last several years, he's done a lot more front of camera stuff. But this is his first published game and his first Kickstarter. There are 2 different artists on this game. Clark Miller has previously worked on Darkest Night, Dawn of the Zeds 3rd edition, and Renegade. And Christian Strain has previously worked on Asking for Trobills, Campaign Trail, and Evil Intent. Finally, this one's being published by Grey Fox Games, who's put out Champions of Midgard, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, and Reavers of Midgard. There are 4 different pledge levels here, but there are sort of different combinations of the standard version of the game, the deluxe version of the game, and then the 8-player expansion. So for $79, you can pledge the standard edition of the game. For $109, you can pledge the deluxe version of the game, and that's going to throw in things like acrylic planets, ship miniatures, token upgrades, and an asteroid extractor. Then if you want to get the 8-player expansion along with your pledge, because otherwise the game normally plays 4 players, there's 2 different pledge levels that include that. For $129, you can get the standard base game plus the 8-player expansion. And for $169, you can get the deluxe version of the game with the 8-player expansion. Add-ons include a light crystal for $4. Now that's already included in the game, so if you were to get it as an add-on, you'd be getting an extra one. For $5, you can get a white dwarf star. There's already a dwarf star in the game. This is just an alternate color, an alternate version of the dwarf star, if you like the white dwarf star better. For $8, you can throw in an extra dice set, but there's 2 additional dice sets. They're also $8, so for $8, you could get a lunar glow-in-the-dark dice set, and also for $8, you could add on the nebulous sparkly dice set. Finally, for $10, you can get the Infinity expansion, and what that is the alien factions that are a part of the 8-player expansion. So essentially, you would be getting just the player boards, the ability to play those factions without any of the components. So it would give you more choices in terms of the factions that you could play in a 4-player game, but you wouldn't have all of the additional components that you'd need to play an 8-player game. But if you like the game and you don't think you're going to play it beyond a 4-player count, but you want to have more factions available for you to choose from in your 4-player games, this is the best way to accomplish that without having to get all of the extra plastic and the components that would come with the 8-player expansion. Continental US shipping is being estimated at either $15 or $20. So if you get either the standard or the deluxe version, it's going to be $15 for shipping. If you get either of those in the bundles with the 8-player expansion, it's going to be a $20 shipping cost in the continental US, estimated. And finally, Gray Fox Games is shooting to deliver this one in April of 2023. So that wraps up the 5 campaigns that are currently running and will be completing their funding this week. And that leaves me with the games that I personally pledged from the last week. So I talked about 5 different campaigns. They included things like Mall Peak, Silicon Valley. I didn't back either one of those. I did back one game. There was also Legacy of Thrax, The Awakening, and Aldara with the big chunky ship miniatures. That was another 4X game. I didn't pledge either of those. What I did pledge was Paradox Initiative, or The Paradox Initiative. Depending on where you're looking, they kind of have it posted different ways. That is the new game by Brian Sewer that has players trying to get fabric of space-time from other planets. And there's this kind of Bejeweled thing going on in their player mat where they're trying to play this mini game to match up different resource types. I'm really becoming a big fan of Brian Sewer. Merchants of the Dark Road is pretty cool. I'm liking his game Freshwater Fly. Have not played Coldwater Crown yet. And everything that he's creating and designing seems to be getting better and improving. He's just a really, really good designer. This is a redesign of an earlier game of his. And probably most notably, they had this really cool thing where they had 18 different artists that all did player mats. Now the game has a 4-player count, so you don't really ever need more than 4 playmats, but you theoretically could get 18 different playmats, player boards. They're neoprene mats for the player boards, and just have a lot of choices. And there are a lot of great artists working on this. You've got Bamiko, Ian O'Toole, Beth Sobel, Kwanchai Maria, just to name a few. It's enough that I'm not going to get more than 4 player mats for it. It seems unnecessary. But it's going to be a choice because a lot of artists that I really like have done player mats. And then there are a lot of player mats that look really cool, maybe even better than some of the mats designed by artists who I really like. So I'm going to have to make a decision when they end up doing the pledge manager to figure out which of the 4 mats that I'm going to get. But I'm really excited to get that game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Whatever play mats you get, it's by 18 great artists. It's going to look beautiful, and I'm excited to check out the design by Brian Sewer as well. Now, I only had 1 game acquired during this period, although technically it's 2 games, and that was my pledge for Nemesis Lockdown, which also included the original Nemesis. Now, that is a big, expensive, sprawling game, both versions of it. The first one took off a few years ago when that delivered, that Kickstarter, the original Nemesis. It's basically Alien, the board game. And it takes a page, I think, from Dead of Winter, where it's a cooperative game, but there could be traitors on the board working for different kinds of goals and different kinds of ends. Things that may pit players secretly against one another a little bit. Beyond that, it's a cooperative game and you're trying to survive and not fall victim to the aliens. But it is a amazing thematic game that has, I think, really attracted the love of the mainstream, which is not always easy to do with a game that's this kind of expensive and sprawling. So I went not quite all in on both games because I didn't get some of the miniature terrain expansions or some of, they have a few different expansions that just give you different kinds of aliens. They're just cosmetically different, but they don't add anything to gameplay. So I stayed away from those things, but other than that, I did buy all of the various expansions. I got the play mats, I got miniatures for everything. So it's a not inexpensive 2 games, and it'll be something that I'll need to decide whether I want to keep in my collection over the long term, because these are big games and they take up a lot of space. And They're games that I think are better the more people you have playing them. And both of them play up to 5 players, and I think, I mean, they can get a little crazy at 5 players, but I think it's also the most fun and thematic having a full 5-player count. So it's the kind of game that is a big centerpiece of a collection, and I guess you need to make sure that you're using it at least occasionally, but they can be hard to get these games to the table because they are these big games and there's a lot going on and a lot happening. But amazing, amazing thematic experiences, Nemesis, and I'm sure Nemesis Lockdown will be as well. So I'm excited to get both versions of that game played, and it may not happen right away. I've got a wedding coming up on June 17th. I'm working on my upstairs studio space and getting kind of new equipment in and improved equipment and lighting and cameras and stuff like that, and evolving the channel. So I may not get Nemesis or Nemesis Lockdown played right away, but they're games that I'm very much looking forward to playing. And I have played the original Nemesis before on friends' copies. My only real criticism with them is that they are player elimination games, and it's possible to get killed very early on. So it's something to be aware of, and normally I don't like that. But I think Nemesis is such a fun, thematic, cool game that I don't mind it for once in that game, because the game's so well done in so many other ways. Thank you for spending some time with me, watching this video, and hearing about the campaigns that are currently running. I hope that I helped you decide if any of them were games for you or not. Come back in a few days. I will have next week's Kickstarter Weekly posting later in this week, so by Friday night it should be up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great week. Play lots of great games, and I will see you all again very soon. Take care.